Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the 8th Deep Dive in our series, Mastering Prompt Engineering, from Basics to Advanced Practices. It's a companion to George Tone's Iterative AI Professional Prompt Engineering Guide. We're kind of shifting gears a bit today. We spent a good amount of time learning how to construct effective prompts. But now, we're going to talk about evaluating and refining those prompts to get the best possible results from AI.
Yeah. It's like you've got a finely tuned instrument, but you need to learn how to play it masterfully.
Yeah.
We've got the instrument, now we need to make sure that we can make beautiful music with it.
Oh, I love that analogy. So
Yeah.
before we dive into the specifics, can you explain to our listeners why this evaluation and refinement process is so crucial in prompt engineering?
Well, think about it this way. You wouldn't just write a first draft of an important email and hit send without reviewing it first.
Right.
You'd check for typos, clarity, make sure the tone is appropriate for the recipient. The same principle applies to prompt engineering. Evaluating and refining your prompts, it's like that crucial review process. That ensures that you're communicating effectively with the AI and setting it up for success.
That makes perfect sense. So by evaluating, we're essentially proofreading and editing our prompts to ensure they're clear, concise, and aligned with our desired outcome.
Exactly. It's all about maximizing the quality of the AI's output by giving it the best possible instructions.
Okay. So let's say we've crafted a prompt and the AI has generated a response. What are the key indicators we should be looking for to evaluate its effectiveness? What are those red flags that scream, this prompt needs a makeover?
There are 3 primary elements to focus on. First and foremost, we need to assess the relevance of the response. Is the AI actually answering the question we posed? Or is it going off on a tangent, providing information that's completely unrelated to our request?
So if the AI's response is like a rambling off-topic conversation at a dinner party, that's a sign we need to refine our prompt.
Exactly. We need to steer the conversation back on course. The second indicator is clarity. Can we easily understand the response? Is it written in a way that's clear, concise, free of jargon or confusing language? Or is it muddled and difficult to decipher?
Clarity is key, especially when we're dealing with complex topics. We're trying to convey specific nuances.
Absolutely. And lastly, we need to consider the completeness of the response. Did the AI provide a comprehensive and thorough answer? Or did it only deliver a partial or incomplete response, leaving us with unanswered questions or gaps in information? Think of it like asking for directions, but only receiving half the route.
So it's like getting a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah.
Frustrating. So if we spot any of these issues, we need to roll up our sleeves and start refining our prompt.
You got it, thankfully. There are a number of proven strategies and techniques we can use to make those adjustments and guide the AI towards generating the exceptional results that we're looking for.
Okay, I'm ready to learn those strategies. What are some of those techniques that can help us transform our prompts from good to outstanding?
One of the most effective techniques is to add more context to your prompt. Instead of asking broadly about remote work, for example, you could get specific and ask something like, what are the 3 biggest challenges faced by managers who lead fully remote teams? That way, you're giving the AI more information to work with, which can lead to a more focused and insightful response.
That's a great point. It's like giving the AI a more detailed roadmap instead of just a vague destination. What are some other ways we can refine our prompts?
Another powerful strategy is to break down complex tasks into smaller, more digestible steps. Don't overwhelm the AI with a massive request. Just break it down into manageable chunks.
Okay, I see what you mean. So for example, instead of saying, write a comprehensive marketing plan for a new line of sustainable shoes, you might say, first, identify the target audience for sustainable shoes. Then brainstorm 3 key selling points that would appeal to that audience, and so on.
Exactly. By breaking down the task, you're guiding the AI through a step-by-step process, which can make it easier for it to generate a well-structured and comprehensive response. And don't forget to specify the output format. Do you want a bulleted list, a table, a poem? Telling the AI exactly how you want the information presented can make a huge difference in the clarity and usability of the output.
It sounds so simple, but I can already see how much of a difference these refinements can make. And the best part is, you don't have to be a coding wizard to implement them.
Exactly. It's all about understanding how to communicate effectively with the AI. Now, you mentioned a prompt makeover earlier, and I think it would be helpful to walk through a real-world example of how this iterative refinement process works in action. Let's revisit that customer service scenario we talked about earlier. Remember, our initial prompt was simply write a response to a customer who's upset about a delayed shipment.
Right. And we talked about how that prompt might not provide enough context or guidance for the AI to generate a truly effective response.
Precisely. So, how could we refine that prompt to make it more effective? Let's consider the listener's work in this case. You told me before the episode that the listener works for a company that sells handmade jewelry. So let's tailor our example to that context. Instead of a generic delayed shipment, let's imagine the customer is upset. because they ordered a custom-made necklace for their anniversary, and it hasn't arrived on time.
Okay, that's a much more specific and emotionally charged scenario. Now, how do we translate that into a refined prompt?
We could refine it by saying something like, write a compassionate and understanding response to a customer whose custom-made anniversary necklace has been delayed. Apologize for the delay and explain that, due to the handmade nature of the jewelry, each piece requires meticulous craftsmanship, which can sometimes lead to slight variations in production time.
Okay, so we've added more context. By explaining the reason for the delay and emphasizing the care and craftsmanship that goes into making each piece, I can see how that would help set a more understanding and empathetic tone. But what if the AI still generates a response that feels a bit too formal or impersonal?
Then we refine it further. We can add something like, reassure the customer that their necklace is being crafted with the utmost care and attention to detail, and offer to provide them with a personalized update from the artisan who is creating their piece.
I see. By offering a personalized update from the artisan, we're adding a human touch and making the customer feel like they're part of the creation process, which can help alleviate their anxiety and frustration. This iterative refinement process is fascinating. It's like we're sculpting the AI's response, layer by layer, until it achieves the desired shape and tone. But we're running out of time for this segment. Yeah, it's amazing to see how these small tweaks can have such a significant impact on the AI's output. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, tools and techniques that can streamline this evaluation and refinement process. Can you share some insights on those?
Absolutely. One technique we've already touched on is iterative refinement, which is essentially a process of trial and error. You start with an initial prompt, evaluate the AI's response, and then make adjustments based on your observations. And this cycle repeats until you achieve the desired outcome. It's a bit like fine-tuning a recipe, adding a pinch of this or that, until you get the flavor just right.
That makes sense. What other tools or techniques should we have in our prompt engineering toolkit?
Another powerful technique is A/B testing, where you create 2 or more versions of a prompt and compare the AI's responses to see which one performs better. This can be especially useful when you're trying to optimize for a specific metric, like engagement or click-through rate. It's like running a science experiment to see which prompt yields the most desirable results.
So it's like having a prompt competition to see which one reigns supreme. That's a fantastic way to put it. What about user feedback? How can we incorporate that into the refinement process?
User feedback is invaluable, especially when you're using AI to generate customer-facing content, if possible. Gather feedback from real users on the AI's responses. Ask them if the responses are clear, helpful, and meet their expectations. This direct feedback can provide incredibly valuable insights into what's working and what needs improvement.
That's a great point. It's like getting a second opinion from the people who matter most. Any other secret weapons we should know about?
Prompt templates can be incredibly useful. Think of them as pre-designed blueprints for prompts that you use frequently. You can customize them for specific tasks. And over time, you can refine and adjust them based on the AI's performance, creating a library of go-to prompts for various scenarios.
Brilliant. It's like having a cheat sheet for crafting effective prompts. And speaking of challenges, are there any common pitfalls that even seasoned prompt engineers should be aware of?
Absolutely. One common trap is overloading the prompt with too much information. In an effort to be super specific, we might end up overwhelming the AI, leading to a scattered and confusing response. It's like trying to cram too many ingredients into a recipe, ending up with a dish that lacks focus.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot between providing enough context and keeping the prompt concise and focused.
Exactly. Another challenge is understanding AI limitations. It's important to remember that AI doesn't think like humans do. It's predicting patterns based on the massive amounts of data it's been trained on. So if the AI consistently generates inaccurate or irrelevant responses, it might be due to the inherent limitations of the model itself, rather than a poorly crafted prompt.
That's an important point to remember. We can't expect the AI to know everything or to perform tasks that are beyond its capabilities. It's important to have realistic expectations.
Absolutely. And lastly, it's important to avoid iterating too quickly. It can be tempting to jump straight into refining a prompt after the first response, but sometimes it's helpful to let the output simmer for a bit, to fully analyze the response before making adjustments. This ensures that we're not making changes based on incomplete information or rushing the process.
It's like taking a step back to see the forest for the trees before making any impulsive tweaks to our prompts.
Precisely. And with that in mind, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
This has been such an insightful discussion. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the art of prompt evaluation and refinement. It's clear that this stage is just as important as the initial prompt creation process, if not more so.
I completely agree. By mastering these techniques, our listeners can truly unlock the full potential of AI and generate those exceptional results they're striving for.
And speaking of unlocking potential, I have a challenge for our listeners before we sign off. Think about a prompt you've used recently. Now, put on your prompt evaluator hat and ask yourself, could I make it even better using the techniques we've discussed today?
How might those seemingly small refinements transform your results? We encourage you to experiment and share your prompt refining experiences on social media. We'd love to hear about your discoveries and successes.
That's a great challenge. We can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive into the fascinating world of prompt engineering. Until next time, keep those prompts sharp and your AI interactions brilliant.
And remember, the journey to mastering prompt engineering is a marathon, not a sprint. Enjoy the process, stay curious, and never stop refining your approach. Until next time.